to let you know that we're going to be live streaming this. So I'm going to give Juan the cue to kind of begin that process. Hopefully, can you hear me well with this mic? Okay, great. I don't have the best projection, so this helps. This is a big space. Get out of the way here. Again, thank you. Welcome to our Jefferson High School Modernization Town Hall. My name is Steve Efforts. I'm one of the project managers, and I'll let Yana and Keisha introduce us. Okay, yeah, technology. So this is one of a series of town halls that we're having typically right before our comprehensive planning committee meetings a little later this evening. So we use this as an opportunity to kind of give broader updates to the community and members of the public that are interested in the project, and also to get your comments and feedback as well. So I just want to certainly welcome you to grab as much food as you want, nutrients, and we also have several flyers that kind of talk about the project and the town halls and a little bit about our process, so you can gather those as well. So today's meeting will begin with our land acknowledgements and anti-corruption statement. We'll provide an update on the very active engagement work that's happening right now. We'll go over what I described as CPC, is our comprehensive planning committee, the prior work that we've done with them and what we're doing this evening, some of our strategies and goals for this evening. And then we'll give also an update on the Harriet Tubman middle school relocation, because there's relationship for those that process to the Jefferson modernization. And then at the end, we'll kind of give an update just on our process on the Jefferson project as we get comments. We'll begin with the land acknowledgement anti-oppression statement.
Hi, I'm Anna Horn, project manager at PPS, and I will begin. At PPS, we strive to strengthen our relationships with the Native community and Native nations. A symbol of this commitment is the land acknowledgement. These statements bring visibility to the first peoples of our collective home. This statement is meant to provide information and context while also encouraging all of us to reflect on our current day relationship with Native people and Native experiences. We acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional lands of the Chinook, Clackamas, Kalapuya, Multnomah, Wasco, Blacklammet, Tualatin, Molalla. We also know that many other tribes made their homes along Columbia and the Willamette rivers. We honor their history and acknowledge the sacrifices they made. Let us also acknowledge the robust present-day federally recognized tribes of this area: the Manuel, Grand, Selects, and Powell. In addition, I would like to acknowledge the Chinook Nation, who has been seeking federal recognition for many years. The urban Indian community is made up of tribal diversity that originates from around the country, representing 400 tribes. The urban Indian community has a vivid history made up of people whose journeys have brought them to Portland by ways of forced displacement or seeking more opportunities. Today, these tribes and communities celebrate their heritage, showing resilience and tenacity that would be greatly admired by their ancestors. Within Portland Public Schools today, we serve students and families representing more than 150 different tribal nations within our education system. It is our obligation to teach accurate information, past and present, about the impact of colonization on our students. All students today are made visible the multitude of Native families and many diverse ways Native communities and families are living in the present. We encourage every person to reflect on their own history, understand the history of colonization and genocide, and support Indigenous sovereignty, priorities, and actions. This acknowledgement is one step that we can take to improve our support of Indigenous communities in the area. In addition to acknowledging the land and those that have been here since time began, we must also remember our stolen siblings from Africa who labored with the vast wealth of this country. These two communities and the atrocities committed against them are intrinsically intertwined due to our existence within a white supremacist world. Everything we have is due to stolen land and stolen labor, and every system and institution that impacts their lives is built upon this site. It is our job to speak that truth into spaces so that we can begin to heal. This is our planning and engagement schedule. Today we are between the 31st of October and November 7th at the CPC meeting. And this is the town hall meeting. Later will be the CPC meeting. But this overall shows the schedule of engagement that we've done to date. And as you'll see, we are on the second to last slate of meetings with community at large. And we are marching towards a board presentation that will share the work. Upcoming engagement opportunities are open house. So we'd like you to save the dates if you can finally selected one. And it is going to be on November 16th from 4 to 8 p.m. It will be here. I'm looking at ready to get some confirmation on that. This open house will proceed the final proceeding and with the final presentation to community for submission to the board. And as far as student engagement, we are also actively doing in-class workshops and presentations. We did 5 last Friday. We did 3 today. There are more to come. And those are really great to see students actively involved and take ownership of what their future to be. And if you've been having so much fun coming to these meetings and talking about the future of the school, we will be approving for our design advisory group shortly. So stay tuned for information about that. And an update on engagement. This slide shows the breadth and depth of the community outreach that we've been doing. And every day, just as fast as we print the slide, the numbers are out. So this totals, that was about 70 engagement. We are now at about 80. There was one night when we had ourselves, Bora, co-locate, all out at different events on the same night. We're trying to reach far and wide to share the project and get feedback. And we're not only just talking to the community, like we're reaching out to middle schools, we're getting to theater community. We're also making hands and working with CBSE. We tabled at Tubman, we're tabling at King, we're everywhere we can be. And then this timeline shows that in addition to these meetings, we're also doing small one-on-ones, as well as bigger events that are like barbecue or football game. And so this part of the process, frankly, is my favorite. So I like being out for that. Some of the emerging things that we're starting to hear are on this slide. Big picture, we're hearing that people want welcoming and accessible spaces. I think that the bubble sizes are not necessarily representative of the frequency with which we're hearing it, but if they were honoring cultural histories and acknowledging injustices, that would be really large. Well, as much as we're reaching out, still want more information about what's to come. And we're working on trying to be more clear about next steps, what's coming later, just what the impact is. And they want to know how that information is being used and what the impact is on the future. We're also starting to hear about people wanting more CTE opportunities and more STEM opportunities in the building. And then worries. So we people to tell us about, facilitate something about the process, where experiences, concerns, opportunities, questions. There we go. And one of the concerns that we're hearing, people are worried about the loss of cultural connection to the school. And so we are hearing that, and we're doing what we can to.
It feeds me all this. Yeah.
Thank you, Gemma. So I wanted to review what we've been doing again in our comprehensive planning committee, or CPC. So at CPC 5, the design team and the engagement team came back with 4 options that reflected kind of a lot of the input that we have received, both from the CPC members and from the broader community. What I'll do here is just very briefly, there's a lot of detail in each one, but I'll kind of give you the high points of these 4 different options. And just for your information, if you're not as familiar with the project, currently we're looking at the 2 binary options: retain at least a portion of existing Jefferson, or to basically rebuild and maybe keep a small piece. But as you may be aware, the 1909 building, which is kind of just north of us here, is kind of considered the historic component. So that's what you'll see, particularly in the 2 retain options. So in the retain 1909 option, that's really the focus of the effort. So that's this, you can recognize this kind of H-shaped building. Based on a lot of input from the community, that was a real focal point of people's experiences. And one of the components really had to do with kind of creating an accessible entry to that building, which, as you're probably aware if you've been in here, there's a lot of challenge in getting into the building, knowing what's the front door and all of that. So that becomes kind of the focal point to basically retain and renovate that main building. But it also, we heard a lot of input from the community and from the CPC about the importance of people's lives of the gym itself and the athletic program. So this building here is a 1964 gym, and what we would do in this scenario is actually take that and actually add on to it, create what we're calling an athletics complex. So the 2 of those together would become kind of a larger athletics facility for the campus. So then, in addition to that, we understand also the connection to the existing athletic field and track, which the community put a lot of time and effort and money, frankly, into upgrading that field and track. So that is something that we've looked into and that we can actually renovate relatively in a straightforward way. So that becomes kind of the other component. And then beyond that, we basically look at adding this wing to the south, which includes kind of additional program space, as well as this large piece here is the performing arts complex. And that's, as you're probably aware, performing arts and the dance program are really part of the Jefferson program. And then beyond that, beyond the main field, we would have an athletic field kind of on the main site, and then another athletic field on the site that's just south of it. So I won't go over all of the analysis that we did, but a lot of it that we looked at, which is highlighted in disruptions, we tried to understand kind of what the impacts would be. And we found that a lot of it was kind of less impact because we were maintaining the field, we were renovating the existing building. The approach also allows them to stay in the existing or use the existing performing arts building until the new one is built. So that's kind of a high level view of the retain 1909 option. The second option is retain 1909 and 1928. And the 1928 building, you may not be aware, but building kind of is in the center of the campus, but it's actually pretty well hidden by other additions that have come afterwards. But it has actually some real historic kind of components to it. It was in some ways less impacted than the 1909 building. So I think there was some feedback from the community that that would be an interesting building to try to maintain into the future, if possible. So this option is quite similar to the prior option, but in some ways, because the 1928 building is right there in the center, it kind of limits how you can add on to the existing and how you can access between the 1909 building and this new performing arts wing. So that's essentially the major difference. It also kind of changes how you would create an athletics and youth practice field to the south of that. And so just kind of looking at disruptions, very similar, I think pretty close to the prior example. So then we come to the two options that look at largely removing the 1909 and in some cases keeping a certain component, in this case the existing 1964 gym. So basically what this does, and through all of these options involve kind of multiple phases and staging, and actually all of them accommodate students being able to stay on the overall site, but there would be different phases to move from one building to another. So this would fully renovate that 1964 gym and create that similar athletics complex. The benefit of this option is that it allows students to stay in the 1909 building while all the other work is happening. So in some ways, impact on the students is a little bit less than on the prior option. And in this option, where the position is to the south, it also allows us to maintain that existing track and field. So there's some benefit to that as well. And so basically, with another athletics field here, it pushes the main complex of the building to the south with the theater, main entry on commercial, and then kind of a larger wing kind of facing Alberta, and a similar athletics field on the south. So yeah, I think the main features again are more of a street presence along Alberta, which is different than the other options. And again, a lot of the benefits you staying in the existing 1909 building during renovation or during construction. And then finally, the final option was a new north option, which again is based on a lot of feedback from the community, from the CPC, was looking at kind of having more of the street presence on Killingsworth and really kind of reorganizing the entire site. So you wouldn't keep the existing field where it is, you would rebuild it to the south. It does offer a little more opportunity to kind of spread that field out a little bit in terms of the size and the overall ability to accommodate athletics. So it would have, again, a street presence on Killingsworth, particularly with the theater, which again, being a major program for Jefferson, would kind of give it some visibility on that street. Just in terms of disruptions, again, track and field would be demolished. So obviously that would require finding another off-site option for athletics during that period of time. And again, similar in terms of impact to academics, with students staying in classrooms while the buildings are being constructed. So what we've been doing too, beyond sharing this with the CPC, is we've been broadening our outreach to co-locate and their community design organizers through other community engagement opportunities. And we've been asking people to kind of share their opinion and their feedback on these options through this survey. So if you like, there's Well, you can scan that right now, or you can come back to us later, we can kind of share that with you. But we want to just kind of reinforce that we're part of the process where everything is essentially a work in progress. And so part of the feedback that we're looking for is both the community, the CPC, but also all of our other stakeholders. So we're looking at some of the disruptions that I was talking about, and some of those, we're weighing them and kind of deciding what can we manage and accommodate and what simply we can't kind of address. But it's really important, we want people to kind of share their feedback, particularly at this point in the process, just to kind of get as broad a kind of input we can get that, you know, on these options. What's that?
It's working. Well, it's working now. Okay, just I was.
Yeah, it's a little acoustically. We also wanted to let you know that at that link, there's you can access a narrated slideshow, which is much more comprehensive version of what I'm doing right now. So you can kind of learn in more detail about each of the scenarios, what are all the features of them, how the work occurs over time, and then again, some of those, the benefits, but also some of the disruptions from each of the options. So in preparation for this evening's meeting, CPC 6, again, we've been going through that process, and I'll talk a little bit about, you know, some of the criteria and kind of that we've had to balance and measure and weigh in terms of narrowing down these options. But where we've landed for this evening are two options. One is that retain 1909 option, which again also keeps that 1964 gym, but does not keep the 1928 building. And then the new south option, which again is has more of that Alberta presence, but also allows us to maintain the 1964 gym and that existing renovated existing track and field. So part of what we wanted to share with you and what we will be talking about with CPC members this evening are some of the factors that kind of fed into the process of evaluating the four options and kind of narrowing it down to these two. So this kind of bubble cloud kind of gives you a little bit of sense of scale and input and impact from different factors that we had to consider. So kind of that upper right is obviously one of the most critical inputs, which is the community feedback and input, both on the CPC committee itself, but also all of the wide kind of input that we're getting from the community, from engagement with the community. But then there's obviously, you know, a whole other set of factors that we have to consider. So you'll kind of see some of them kind of highlighted here. One of them I'll highlight is in red there is really the critical aspect of having kind of the most important kind of athletic venues for particularly the outdoor field venues. So it's a track and field, it's a half practice field, and then it's a multi-use south field. So in working with the school and the athletic program, those were kind of the highlighted kind of important factors that we considered. We looked obviously what we call here the ed specs, which if you're not aware, that's just sort of defines the programmatic requirements for high school of this size. And so obviously how we laid out those buildings that you saw is very much defined by the requirements of the ed specs. A really important one is highlighted in black, maybe to be as stark as possible, but really looking at the simplest phasing as possible, because phasing has both schedule budget impacts, but it also has impacts in terms of disruption to students and staff. So that was an important factor. And then in terms of schedule, the green one in particular talks about the fact that we, as we described in the 2020 bond, our goal is to have students in new classrooms by the fall of 2026. So that kind of feeds into how we analyze different options and which ones allow for that and which ones don't. And then finally, all construction would be complete by fall of 2020. And so that basically, because we have to kind of build things in phases, there will be kind of the final work that we do, a lot of it is related to field work and kind of finishing up the site. So that's the final criteria. And this kind of gives you, based on what you've seen in those diagrams or kind of the options, this kind of lays it out on the site, just to kind of give you a visual representation. So again, you can see track and field was really important that it remain in use throughout construction because of the difficulty if they didn't have access to that for several years and just the lack of availability of other field space. The gym, I think, was an important factor, just people's connection to it. I mean, it's quite a nice gym. It may not function in the same way that it does currently, but it's a great facility that we're trying to preserve. Basically, the classroom and administration building, this 1909 building, I think we began the process thinking that maybe we would have to build a portable classroom facility on the south site, but that would have its own obvious disruptions to students and staff. But in particular, it also, obviously, it costs more, it kind of adds another phase of work that we're trying to avoid. So if we can kind of maintain classrooms administration during construction, that would be ideal. We also were in the building, that's the theater and the servery, and it's really important to us that we kind of allow that use during construction before this gets demolished. Dance studios, obviously important to the Jefferson dance program, so maintaining that. Main entry on commercial, that was a focus of a lot of community members, that was an important component. And again, going back to the idea of trying to kind of create more of a sense of entry to the site, because it's challenging now.
Is that original 1909 building, is that enough space to accommodate the number of students that are expected? I mean, is the building, just based on the scale, it seems really small.
It's quite large, actually, because it's 4 stories, and it's actually perfectly almost situated in proportion.
There will be new building as well. This is just to show.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, there'll be additional, but just in terms of its ability, it can, in the retained 1909 option, it can accommodate just a lot of the general education classrooms, not all of the program, but a lot of it. And then, yeah, again, for the rebuild option or the new south option, the idea is to kind of have that built by 2026, having classrooms for the future students, which is, basically the current enrollments, so we can accommodate that. So I think that was some of that diagram. Okay, yeah, we're going to now shift into talking about the Tubman relocation project because of the overlap with our process. We'll hand it out to Keisha. Yeah.
So like Steve said, I'll be giving some info on the Tubman location. Just providing this overview for informational purposes. Really. The staff running the Tubman project have begun working closely with the CDFC staff and on the engagement process surrounding the Tubman relocation, and their site selection process is currently ongoing. Today, I'll just be discussing the Tubman relocation with respect to how it could potentially affect our Jefferson modernization. Next. So relocating Harriet Tubman onto the main Jefferson site is one option that's been under consideration. Our understanding, though, is that it's this option is not really supported by any of our board members, and given the significant impact it would have on both Jefferson and Tubman, as you can see. These substantial impacts include an extremely dense Jefferson High School, addition, limited access to lighting, and it would also create a 4-story middle school without any access to outdoor space, really, And the combined, massing of the two, the mass of the buildings of the two put together really just does not suit the more residential, siting of the surrounding complex. So we don't anticipate, this option to move into further consideration. Next. This is another option for on the main lot. Kind of similar in diagram to the new north option that you just described. This option fully replaces the existing Jefferson High School with a new 4-story structure on Chancellor. A new middle school would be built on the southern edge. The program requirements of the two greatly restrict the area that we have left over for building fields and track and field, combined with vehicular access. Track and field may or may not actually fit between the two buildings. So similar to the previous option, we don't anticipate this one continuing being considered. Next. So this site is on the south lot, just across Alberta. It's the smallest of the 3 sites that were studied. It is possible to fit a 4-story middle school on the site. However, it's not possible to accommodate any exterior outdoor fields. As you can see in that diagram in the lower right, it also has a couple of major utility easements, which also further limits the buildable area. That includes a sewer easement and a gas easement. So it greatly limits our options. So yeah, next. The left side is the current Cairo site on the Humboldt side. This can accommodate the required middle school program in a 3-story structure. The site's also large enough to provide outdoor play and recreation spaces, but not large enough to provide like regulation size sports fields, but this may be accommodated by potentially sharing fields on that south lot. The city of Portland may also require us to make some significant right-of-way improvements at some significant cost to make the site accessible. The most substantial obstacle to the development of this site is the existing multi-year lease with Kairos. Nonetheless, this site has the fewest drawbacks from a physical and spatial planning perspective. That's it. Next, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Keisha. This really is just kind of an overview of the schedules for Tubman and Jefferson. So on top, you'll see HTMS is here at Tubman Middle School. And it's basically a concept schedule because obviously we're still in the process of considering different site options. And then the lower schedule is the current Jefferson planning schedule, which Ayana presented before. But you'll see kind of in gray and kind of that orange dashed line, just kind of where we are in the process in terms of, considering both sharing those options with, you'll see the facilities, the Board of Education Facilities and Operations Committee, as well as obviously this town hall meeting and kind of just looking at this as an opportunity to kind of share updates about those two processes, in particular because, as I think Ayana described, we're going to be presenting the Jefferson modernization, or high school modernization, preferred option to the board in December. So we're kind of at that pivotal point. And again, with the Harriet Tubman process, it will continue on both in terms of the engagement process and then eventually with planning and design. Yes. Yes, I am less directly involved, but it has most of it essentially all to do with the expansion of I-5. So the widening of I-5 and the impacts on the air quality and the existing Tubman site, which is right up against I-5. So it's both the physical impacts, it's the ongoing air quality impacts to that site. So there's been an agreement with the state to basically provide funding to relocate Tubman to another site. So the process we're going through right now is that kind of site assessment and evaluation process to consider what other options are available.
Did it have to be within a certain distance of Tubman? I mean, these just all seem like they're so strongly related to like the Jefferson site.
Right,
Was that?
that's what I just wanted to make sure I clarified. Then saying that it's other sites being considered as well, I just wanted to give you how the current study, the ones that we studied for the Jefferson site, and how it could potentially affect our site.
And those are all three of those options presented are new construction, right? Well, would they be using the existing Kairos building or would it all be brand?
It's I think it's all brand new. To be honest, it wasn't a deep dive into design or planning or anything. It was really more just mapping to this building fit, you know. But yeah, so but there are multiple other sites in addition to them. But yeah.
Let's see, time check. Okay, good. So hopefully your heads are not spinning. I'm going to quickly jump back to Jefferson to kind of wrap up our update. Very quickly, we're just sort of both deep into the engagement process that we talked about, deep into the development of the design options that we saw, and then a lot of the kind of due diligence and owner services that we're proceeding with. So environmental, tree canopy, survey, traffic, which is a really important component, obviously, geotech, and then a major feature or component coming up, and that we've been doing on an ongoing basis is contractor outreach, because we'll be we're preparing to issue what's called a CMGC RFP, which is just a fancy way of saying kind of soliciting for contractor proposals for this project. So really, one of the major efforts we've been making is to meet with minority contractor organizations to share project information and really try to spread the news about the project. We'll be doing that at our open house as well, trying to kind of bring the concept community into the process. And really trying to learn from them how best to engage with them, both ahead of that RFP, but also to make sure that we kind of find a way to bring on board as many minority contractors as possible. And a lot of what we're doing is kind of taking lessons learned from the past projects that we've done, really trying to understand what are the best strategies for kind of bringing as much participation as possible. And then just kind of a final overview of where we are, just budget and schedule, where obviously we've been talking a lot about the schedule in terms of kind of different milestones that we're looking to meet. We're also obviously looking at cost estimates for really the two primary options that we're looking at. And then this kind of gives you some of the major submission of material and kind of updates to the school district. So a couple of them here in blue, early October and the end of November, we have our updates to the bond accountability committee. I guess that might be early December, yes. I talked a little bit about presenting this to the board's facilities operations committee. So in yellow, you can see that later in October and a little bit mid-November. I think we might have one more actually now later in November. And then our final in red presentation of a preferred option to the Board of Education. So it kind of just gives you kind of a big picture of where we are, and then obviously jumping right in January of 23 to the design process. A little bit of what you might have seen also around surrounding the site, we posted these land use notice of public hearings. So we have, because we have the historic component of the 1909 building and the 1928. We're bringing this project with the design team and our land use consultant to the Historic Landmarks Commission to talk about kind of the different options. This is a very early stage, so we'll go back as well, but we just want to make sure we're getting all the latest updated information about the city code and kind of what our plans are and what the Landmark Commission, kind of their feedback about that. So again, this is a sign that you'll see around, but I think it's a good sign, so to speak, that we're really moving forward and engaging with the city. So that was it.
That this presentation and all previous presentations could be found on our website at bps.net/Jefferson and you can email us with any questions or comments.
Yes.
What's the timing for the various covenants?
So I think it continues, I think, into 23 with a lot of the due diligence work, but I don't know, Dan, if you wanted to.
Our goal is to identify a new site for covenant for next year, and then we'll be for a period of time before they move into the final.
Yes.
Those are all elected.
That, I believe, is part of our new standards, climate justice policy standards, so yes. Oh,
When you get it done.
what, oh, is that a plaque we can put up? Oh, that's awesome. Cool. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I really appreciate. Homage to Native Americans, those people who typically get business without measure. My question is, how are you going to demonstrate within the project to students, parents, and guests this land acknowledgement and anti-oppression statement, so that it is not simply at the beginning of each meeting, but is part of the structure and part of what we are moving forward toward by eliminating some things that do not speak to those characteristics.
Sure, unless more want to speak. I would say the precise method upon which we're gonna do that physically in the building is yet to be known, but the guiding principles through which we're working on this project with centered design justice, and the statements that we read are things that we talk about, like, and live on this project. And we've discussed ways in which we can bring forth elements that are within this building and imprint within the physicality of the spaces. The things that we're talking about. I mean, the easy thing to say would be, oh, we'll make sure that that's printed and we can read it, but that's not really the essence of what you're talking about, right? We want to know how do you pass these things in the building so that people live and read, feel those things in the spaces and not just see words, but also in action. And so we're trying to accomplish that. Yes.
We also have co-locate engaged on the project, and they have a very described process of design justice, which not only includes all the amazing engagement that they've been doing for the project, but actually coalescing that information into a set of design justice documents that actually become part of the construction documents eventually. So they are experienced at exactly your question, translating what the community wants and needs and deserves into the project as equitably and feasibly as we can. But that's part of the reason why we retain them or this team so that they can help us with that translation that you're talking about.
I have several questions. The first one is, I saw all the meetings, and it sounds like we really want to have feedback from the business community. And one of the things I noticed was that all of the town meetings are on Wednesdays at 5. And so let's say, well, I have a commitment on Wednesdays, and what if I work and I can't get on and get traffic? So I wonder if you would be willing to have other meetings that are at the exact same time, because that really limits it. There's many people at work, and when they have kids, they have children, that kind of thing. So I'd like to see some more meetings. And I'm a former teacher here, and I really want to see the scanner. And the scanner didn't have it all clear. And I didn't see it really good on the phone. You know, I'd like to, I want to responses to that to get more people. From the town hall type.
We have had events on other days, like our open houses and our design workshops have been on other days. Our town halls and our CPCs have been on Wednesdays, just to try to establish some regularity for the people that have committed to be on the committee. So that is really the infrastructure around that choice. But we do know we have had some events on Saturdays, and we had a barbecue on like Tuesday night, I think that was. And so we have tried our best to create some variety throughout the process. And we'll just maybe work better on the next phase of the design advisory group process, which is programmatic design. And we're starting interaction with the community and be more flexible in how we schedule.
But additionally, I would add, we're also coming to friends that are at school, so we're at the middle school event. We are going to be coming to more PTA meetings. So there are additional school-based events that, in addition to the events that we're going to have.
Somebody else has a question. But I don't know. So the next thing I want to talk about is parking. So when I told here, there was no room for parking, and it appears that maybe there's that little tiny house on the south field, but I want to know is that is the amount of parking applicable to what's at other high schools in the city. And the second thing about parking is I noticed that most of the time the state is saying that in the person you have a problem, but I'm wondering about accessible parking because all of a sudden, you know, your accessibility parking is all of a sudden a quite distance from the building. So that's a concern too.
Well, we definitely don't have the parking designed yet, but as far as you're concerned about accessibility, all of our designs will absolutely meet every possible required accessible code as far as distances and number of spaces to accommodate people and accommodate programs. But we just aren't at that stage of development quite yet to know exactly how many spaces we'll have for parking. Or where
So it's existing level, right?
Right, but I'm talking about, if the building is, moving, the apartment isn't close to the building.
Right, and by code, we have to accommodate accessible parking within those fire distances. Absolutely.
I could, do the same amount of, parking as that other.
Equity is the main concern of our project, of this project overall, and we strive for equity across the board. We just have certain site constraints here, that make it difficult to provide everything that everyone might want. So they're just trade-offs, every part of the program, depending on, where it is in the site or what's best for loading or what the city's requiring or whatever. As I mentioned, not quite at that stage, so.
Right, I know that when I got here, at the third only, a couple times a year, but here's that, here's the thing. I have three, blocks away, and I mean,
So you're just telling us the parking needs to be a bigger bubble one. Bigger bubble, got it.
I think athletics is really important for students. And I see that, so when I drive by or when I talk here, I never saw all of the fields being used. I mean, there may be somebody on the field, but they were using the full field. There ain't, a very public field, but they don't use the entire field. And so, then it seems that that's a lot more fields than any other high school I would know. One of the things that happened, and it was a political move, is that all the industrial parks were eliminated. Without feedback, without any real feedback from staff, students, communities. And one of the big things that people were really upset about was the auto program. The auto repair program was cut. And that not only benefited the students, but it also benefited the community because the community could get a really good deal on getting their car to. And what I'd like to see is, I'd like to see a part of one field be the auto shop piece of the other. It doesn't take up a whole lot of space, and I'd like to see that brought back because I don't know if you. But you're looking at, there's a real shortage of here in this area. And the kids love that program. The kids that want to be able to have, not really cars, but, some kids having a car means having a better job. And so, but just because I think that school isn't all about athletics, it's about education. And I would like to see the auto shop option come back. And I know, anyway, so. I'm glad to hear that because it's a huge deal. And like I said, it was politically motivated, it was clear. And so I'm glad that you heard that, and I hope that will be considered.
Yeah,
Thanks for sharing my.
no problem. I would actually like to invite you to just drop us an email with all of your ideas so that you can kind of work, make sure that you've recorded them with us formally and that we can have just a record of your thoughts on different programs. Yeah. Questions about that?
Yeah, so, I know for sure, I haven't information to all of them, but I know it says a comprehensive plan, and I'm wondering, when it comes to comprehensive, have you guys been able to touch and get any comments from every year of graduating people from Jefferson High School to see what they think, so it can be fully comprehensive? Like the pictures of these meetings, they don't look like a community that I know. we are. So I just want to know what is the survey that has that collected information, and if so, where?
So when we say comprehensive, it more applies to a programming term, meaning the type of space that's going to be in the building. Comprehensive high school educational specification. As far as your comment about the essential demographics of the participants, you are correct in that most of the meetings may not even look like you, but that's why we are reaching out into the community to let them know about what we're doing in other ways other than this meeting. As Ayana mentioned, yeah. Different use of part of it.
That's a really good question. Sorry, I'm saying thank you. My name is Kareem. I'm with Co-Locate Design, so we're the team working on engaging and organizing. Actually, right now, tonight, one of the organizers is part of our team, so it's dinner with classes of the 2000s. So folks who graduated in the 2000s, and they're having a focus group specifically to talk about their experiences, what they want to see the future of Jeff look like. We're doing focus groups with elders of various generations and experiences, and alumni and community members who have invested interest in this space because their friends or family were unable to make it through this time here. So at this point, I would say, and in addition to that, current students spent all day today. We'll be back tomorrow. We were here last week. We've been talking about middle schoolers who will be here in the future, all the way through freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and seniors who are here now. Some of them will be here when construction begins, and some of them will graduate before, because they also have a role in influencing and shaping the future of the school through the generations that are happening. So we have been connecting with students and alumni for pretty much every decade succeeds forward.
In terms of generational practice, I hear about the homeless, always that help, and I know that they happen. They never left. And so we're making sure that the whole are in the industry. And I think feedback off of that. There was one more thing that I think I forgot.
How do you get an invitation to?
That's it. So the only one I found out about is because of the FBI. And like, I'm gonna picture of that event, I still would not have known. I wanted to be at the event, and it was not for me. I didn't have to publicize or it should, where it wasn't where it is to me. I don't care if it was on midnight news. I don't care, but I didn't see it. And I know there's a lot of people who have input that because it wasn't seen. I don't know if you guys are reporting or not reporting, there's a lot of trade. I understand that, but to have these very critical, important meetings and not have people that really care about the school here, all of them here, it's not. So.
Yeah, I think but everything that I really admire and somehow I was so jealous, and so that's how I found out. But I really and I would.
Thank you for sharing that. We haven't been acquiring the neighborhood. That hasn't been one of the big things that we've done. Really, the approach that we take at Co-Locate is an organizing approach. So it's very relationship driven. So that's connecting with the folks that we are working with at the school and understanding how they're getting the word out through their networks. We've been connecting with schools and trying to get newsletters and those venues, and tabling at parents' night and back to school nights, and sharing information.
Actually, it doesn't take effort. I was like, I don't know. But
Well, I think what's helpful for me to understand is where are folks where are we looking for information in order to get connected? Because I know I've heard folks say, like, hey, you get to have more information publicized in the scanning, for example, or more helpful to have information posted into other publications. That's that's not necessarily in my control, but that the more that I hear what those outlets are, I can connect with folks at the farm communications team, try to get the word out in an appropriate outlet.
I can see it on PPS Facebook.
So it's been on PBS's social media sites. We can shout them out right now. Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to say, I think I can talk. I think I can talk a little loud. So I'm the new principal here at Drake Shelton. And I appreciate your comments because I am from Portland. And we push out this information. I push it out about parent nights. I send weekly newsletters. And we're not getting the community, the demographic of folks in our parent meetings and our back to school nights and our open houses. And so if there are places, and I'm going to shout them out now, because even somebody who's from here, born and raised, you know, all that, I'm trying to figure out how I can get more of our demographic of folks that look like me in our meetings. I mean, just last night I had a parent meeting with 6 parents in it, you know, and this is something that we send out every week. We send home stuff, like we send it. So then how, and I'm making a plea right now, right? Where can I go? What can I do to get more of our parents involved into what's happening here? Because I'm willing to do that. So I just wanted to throw that. When you said that, it was like, I got to say something because I just want to make sure that you all know, like, it's not intentional, right? We are trying to be intentional about it. And I put it through the SEI newsletters, Latino Network newsletters. I send it out from home, email address, I mean, everything. So I'm just, what can we do differently to get the different demographics here and to be represented?
There was a shooting someplace right out of Jefferson. As a matter of fact, when I was teaching here, there was a shooting in Salem, people parked up. There was a picture. So if that can get so much time, why is it?
Yes. It's like apples and oranges a little bit, and I can't compare the sensationalism of one event to like a public meeting, you know? But if there are, if you can just think of places where we would touch you, where you are, that you're expecting to see an advertising about this, what you read, what sets you vision, you know, what blogs you read, you know, let us know where we should be advertising, because we're gonna go with our instincts and what's our, you know, parent, teachers, staff, local leaders, community organizations, and we've reached out in every way that we can think of, and so there's additional ways that we think we could let us know. Yeah.
One, I think you all had an opportunity early on making decisions around who was going to engage with. And I don't think it's so much the places, it's the people. And so I'm all on my 4 generations preschool or PTA president. I've had like 15 people reach out to me about, can you show up? Can you answer this question? Will you do this for me? But almost none of those people, they know because I scream Jefferson dinner all the time. But none of those people are alumni. None of those people who I trust that necessarily know the history of this space or any of those things. And so, with the exception of maybe Mr. Hunter. But outside of that, the people who are using to engage should have had connections to this space. Well, not actually to this space and to this actual school. And so I think that's where you can find Aisha's influencers who can bring people in. And I don't think we've done, you all have done that. But again, they've reached out, but again, it needs to be a team. The people who have.
So I want to acknowledge that, like, I don't deserve anybody's trust, and so there's a relationship built and a demonstration of trust. And I appreciate you raising that, and that is a criticism that I take very seriously, that we've been hearing throughout the process since we started. And I can't manufacture a connection, so I'm not gonna pretend. But that is why I'm putting that work is intention on folks who are team who do have those relationships. So that alumni from the 2000s, dinner that's happening tonight, that's led by Ms. Who do it for 20 years. We've got other folks on tonight, I won't say everyone's name, but we've got folks who do have those deep relationships, and I don't have to be, nor should I be, at every one of those conversations that we have, right? Because I don't have that level of trust. But the question of whether or not people are willing to come to these meetings because they distrust the process and the system so much, that's something that I've been hearing from day one and communicating to this team. Like, you want people to show up, you want people to weigh in, but there's been content that has never been reconciled. There's been content that has never been okay. This project is an opportunity to address those harms, and we will ourselves accountable to that, and hold our partners accountable to doing that. And working with folks who as our organization as a team is one measure that we take for that. And 6 months is not enough to heal generations of harm and stress. And we can only continue to hold ourselves accountable. So as we move forward, we'll continue that approach. And what I would just invite is to keep criticizing. Keep bringing the critique, keep bringing the challenges. If we are messing up, we need to do it and know so that we can grow.
I don't believe in this. I believe, everybody is making very good. It's all we're trying to do is say, find a sensationalism in this, because to me it is. That's what we find is sensationalism, so we can.
Be working on that and trying to get the word out in more exciting and sensational in the positive, like joyful sense of the word, not in the.
So it may be time for the things that are important to become sensational. And
one thing I will plug since I have the mic right now is this coming Saturday, one of our organizing team, who's on the name right now, but Tay Thomas, who's a recent graduate last year, and still very much present on campus, organized the band program back in the school. He's hosting a big family community meal and conversation about the leaders on that day. That's going to be at New Song Community Church from 1 to 4 o'clock on Saturday, just on the flyers. But if maybe we can post those flyers up on the district social media or the school's media channels. And New Song Community Church, 1 to 4 Saturday, this coming Saturday. That's one of them. Because of the way that we are working with community, sometimes these events are shorter, people have something that doesn't always go the way the schedule changes. But someone in those events are hopefully accessible and not really close to share them. Sometimes folks want those to be more intimate because there are conversations that don't happen internal to a particular community. But sometimes they happen. That's one. Yes.
There is one other question. I think it's extremely important to have a line of this. And when I say that, I'm referring to people who have been here year after year, and especially like the Donald Dixon, people that the community trust. Most of the veterans happen early. And a lot of people like me who are in the younger generation somebody like those that you will be part of this. I'm like, I trust it. I know you okay. And that's how Jeff works. For people who are outside of Jeff, you will never understand that. So making sure you interact with people, even, I can't remember the other council name, but still quick. Like there's people who understand the workings of Jeff, and there still needs to be the workings of Jeff. It needs to feel like Jeff, because Jeff is not like any other people. And then outside of that, I know I see that the last meeting is on the 16th. And you guys had another meeting on a Saturday that if I would have known about, I would have made it here. But it was not yet. So after the 16th, what's happening? Is there going to be one meeting next year? What does that look like?
That's a good question. Personally, I'm going to respond to the first thing that you said, and then I'm going to hand it back over to Jesse to talk about the future after the 16th. Just to say, actually, Mr. Dixon is someone that we talked to like almost at the outset of this process. And the big barbecue that we had that was organized by some of the team. We had Mr. Paul show up, we had Mr. Ford show up, we had a number of folks who have deep multi-generational connections to this school, this place, Albina, like the history of the community here, geographically and culturally and spiritually. So I don't bring those relationships myself, and most of the folks up here don't. But again, we gotta have those conversations, and it's only because we have folks like Mr. Lee on the team that we really need to run that conversation. There are also folks who are unwilling to go on the record with any of them, who do have deep relationships with them, like Big Brand and other functions. We have to respect that too. But we do as much as we can to let those folks in at every level. I'm glad that you raised that.
Thanks, Greg. Yes, it's a very good question about kind of where this goes into the future. As we develop these, particularly narrow down to these couple of schemes or options, we're developing kind of a much more detailed schedule, basically what begins in 2023. But it's basically, it goes in, we shift from the planning phase that we're in right now into design. And so something I think that was what Ayana referenced is that we'll be recruiting for a design advisory group. So that's one additional way. If you're interested, it's obviously it's a bigger investment. It's kind of like what we have right now, the CPC process. But you'll see the same sets of CPC DAG meetings, town hall meetings, workshops, open houses will continue into the new year. So it just happens kind of in a different way because we'll be kind of looking more closely at a specific design and how that comes together. Yes.
I'm not aware. Is there somebody?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Yes. And we're constantly recording into it as well. So absolutely. Yes.
So I know the process is going to be ongoing and there'll be design and more input, but it feels like a big decision is being made about which of the four plans to go with, whether to keep the current building, raise it, and build a new building. Can you talk a little bit about how that decision is getting made? And who's actually at the table? There are a lot of factors at play and a lot of different positions on it.
And when?
Yes. I'm going to borrow a flyer, which. So we have copies of this flyer, which is called Factors Influencing Jefferson Comprehensive Plan. So, yes, and it is, and that's the truth is the reason we came up with this diagram is because it's hard to describe all of these inputs. It's kind of reflected in that diagram that kind of shows different criteria and things that we weigh, and those community input was one of the major ones, but this is a comprehensive and multi-faceted school, and like all of our schools with many inputs. The educational specifications, our stakeholders, different department groups within the school. Is a big factor just in terms of historic and other components. Thank you for discussing that. Yeah, and just a lot of the historic characters of the building. So it's not necessarily a straightforward up or down, but what we're trying to do is, particularly with this meeting, CPC, is to gather as much both of your input, but also the CPC, so that we can take that into account. And part of it is that no matter which the process that we're going through with co-locate will help inform and shape the design of whichever option we select. So everyone, I think, basically everyone, members of the community, your fingerprints, your input will have an impact, particularly as we gather more and more information and we start to see themes of what people are focused on and feel strongly about.
I was going to say for 20 minutes over time.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
If you'd like to say something to that, it doesn't wrap us.
Okay, but, okay. Yes, we are right, but to answer your question, ultimately, our whole entire process will form a recommendation to the board, and the board will approve the plan. That's the answer. The Board of Education, yeah. Okay, guys, thank you so much.
I'm still really unclear, who exactly determines the recommendation that goes to the board? I get all of the input pieces,
Yeah.
but who's sitting at the table to say, okay, given all this input, this is the recommendation I'm moving to the board?
This whole process, like the four options that you saw was a culmination of all those inputs, right? And then as we continue to get more information, then now it's going down to those two options based on various information from different parts of those bubbles. So now it's down to those two options primarily. And based on more feedback, we're trying to get down to one, what's the best recommendation. You know, like the city's requirement will probably be a very heavy weight on that. You know, things that are literally out of anyone's control. So there's a lot of factors to get how we get to that one option. Yes, they are in the process of being made. We went to a meeting with our, we had a meeting with the city to kind of anticipate and think about how different possible code would affect what we want to do, and et cetera. So we did have some idea when we started with the process, and I heard from the city that has further impacted our options. So it's an ongoing process. That's not a way to refer to that diagram, because it's not like a simple this person or this meeting or this. So it happens, it's really a compilation of many factors. And the date, we will be submitting a recommendation to the board. The deadline is December 1st.
And what's the deadline for 4 to 2?
For the two?
Right, 4 options to 2 options.
Yeah, that's happening today.
That's happening today.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. And then the second to the one will be by December 1st, right? We got to send it on the 1st and 2nd.
Our documents deadline for the 15th or 16th. Whatever that board meeting date, there's a deadline to submit documents, it's like 2 weeks before. Yeah.
Also, just a little confused, because on the town hall meeting, that's the only schedule that was out anywhere, to find it, like, yeah. So I was just trying to figure out what the future past the 16th of November. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. You guys have fun on the next.